Hi, everyone. This is Michelle Blackmer. I am the Healthcare Marketing Director at Informatica, and I'm glad to be here today with our partner, FTI, Future Technologies Incorporated, and Dan Jarina from FTI, who I'll introduce in just a moment. FTI is a data management solutions company focusing on data analytics, data warehousing, and business intelligence. And we've been partnered with them for some time, working together on bringing business intelligence solutions to market. FTI specializes in data management consulting and business intelligence across all industries. They bring industry expertise, specifically in healthcare, to solving problems via a unique data maturity methodology and a structured delivery process. I'm here today with Dan Jarina, a product manager at FTI, and has over 13 years of experience with healthcare business intelligence and analytics. Dan, welcome. And will you tell everyone a bit more about yourself and what FTI does?
Sure. Thanks, Michelle. So my name is Dan Jarina. My day-to-day job before joining FTI was Director of Business Intelligence and Analytics at a 5-hospital healthcare system in Buffalo, New York. And so every day, day in, day out, we'd meet with folks who needed information from various populations of the healthcare system, whether it be nursing, quality, finance, and we'd understand what their needs were, acquire that data, and develop solutions to answer those questions. So when all was said and done, we had over probably 12 to 1,300 or so users using a single set of dashboards through a single tool set that really was a balanced scorecard approach: financial, operational, quality, and staffing metrics. So it's really all of the metrics that you'll need to run a hospital and understand exactly where you have opportunities for improvement, to reduce cost, to improve quality, et cetera. So what we did once I joined FTI was that my team at FTI, we developed the same metrics in order to have sort of an out-of-the-box solution. So what took me a good part of 8+ years during my 13-year tenure there, you could implement in a quick 90 to 120-day window of time. So that's really the intent of what we're providing with the Catalyst tool, is really a quick out-of-the-box solution that allows you to go in any direction you want from that point forward. So that's a bit about me in terms of my experience, just doing this all day, every day for 13+ years at a major healthcare organization in Buffalo. We had about $1.4 billion in revenue, 5-hospital health system, 10,000 employees, about 62,000 discharges a year, and everything that comes with a complicated, running a complicated healthcare organization like that: emergency departments, operating rooms, off-site clinics, et cetera. So a little bit about FTI before we talk about the actual product. FTI, even though today we're talking specifically about healthcare, in general we're experts in data management, system integration, and BI solutions. We can provide implementation, migration, architecture services, and obviously hardware types of support such as database upgrades. So essentially, FTI has the technical expertise to deliver the complete solution from a hardware and software perspective. Additionally, we provide a lot of services around supporting areas where you need support in terms of data integration, data warehouse design, ad hoc reporting, scorecarding. We've done that in numerous industries, and today's solution really focuses on healthcare specifically, but just in general, that's what we do at Future Technologies, is really focus on all aspects of data integration and management. So let's talk specifically about Catalyst itself as a solution. So Catalyst essentially is a predefined data model, okay? So regardless of where your data resides, what we do is we have a predefined set of tables in which we would work with you to map your data, regardless of your disparate source systems, to our data model. Once we map your data to our data model, the layer what's called the metadata layer, which is where you establish all your calculations and joins and hierarchies, et cetera, that's already pre-built as well. And then finally, what your end users will see and use to consume the information, the dashboards themselves, they're also pre-built and predefined. So instead of starting from scratch and determining what are the metrics you need to focus on and what are the attributes you need to compute those, and then iteratively doing it as I did in a past life over the course of 13 years, what we're really saying is here are the key attributes that we need to capture in order to make you successful as an organization. So the important piece of what we're offering here, since everything is pre-built, the work really, and this is why we partnered with Informatica, the work really is focused around, the heavy lifting is focused around the actual migration of data from whatever your source systems might be to our data model. And that's why we've partnered with Informatica, and I'll turn it back to you and give them a bit of an idea as to what that relationship will do for them. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Dan.
Sure.
So what we have found is that often organizations think data migration is going to be pretty straightforward, moving patient information from one system to another. And what we've seen repeatedly is that data migration isn't really just about moving data. It's about making the data in one system work in a new application as it's expected. So as clinicians have been using that data historically, they want to continue to use that data the same way in new systems. So having data where it's needed, when it's needed, in a reliable format is what healthcare organizations require. And that means we have to think about data migration in a different way. So because of this kind of discrepancy between what people think about data migration and what it actually turns out to be, over 80% of data migration projects fail. And the reason for this is because organizations typically assume that data is in a common format, that it's documented consistently, that maybe people who've been at your organization for a long time are documenting everything in a way that a person who replaces them in the future is going to understand, and that all data is available and that all data in the system is valid. This means, for example, that phone numbers are only stored in the phone number field and that there's always only one phone number for that patient, not in some cases I've talked to organizations where maybe another contact or a point of emergency contact is stored in a text field somewhere, and so that makes moving that data more complicated. So the reality is that there are many unknown formats for data, and integration routines that were created years ago by people who no longer work on the application or even in the organization are not around to ask questions of, and that data quality between applications is inconsistent, inaccurate, and unreliable. This is where Informatica really plays a significant role in this project. Informatica has a proven data integration, data management capabilities based on our Power Center ETL technology, which many of you may be familiar with. And we offer capabilities that support methods and tools for migrating this data. So we look at work using an iterative methodology with an experienced professional services team to mass data and manage the data, and then support ongoing governance of the data after go live. This is the only solution available that can really deliver on all of these points in the industry and benefit the solutions by working with FTI. Informatica's data migration process, on the next slide.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
Thanks.
Supports, our data migration process supports a wide array of applications and file types. We discover and understand data via the Data Explorer tool, which really helps users to spot data quality issues, understand the relationships between data, and then take that knowledge and be able to support cleaning of the data via a user interface, so it doesn't require coding and is all reusable. You can even create dashboards for ongoing data management. So this process then becomes iterative, which means that you can move data through the process and then have a holistic and timely view of data in the application that you're moving it to, and you can do this over and over again as often as you need to move data. Like if you did have an acquisition, you had new systems that you need to make available in the application downstream, you can move through the same process again. And our customers have found with this process they're able to be 30 to 40% more productive than they are when they rely on manual methods. Dan, let's talk a little bit more then about the pre-built data model and how customers can customize that data model to their needs once they, as they're moving data from other systems into the solution.
Sure. So as we mentioned, the heavy lifting of this whole process is the actual data migration, and that's why we've partnered with Informatica. But let's talk about the pieces that are pre-built. So we've got a predefined data model. And the predefined data model is essentially a star schema, a relational database that is essentially a series of fact and dimensional lookup tables that we populate with your information. So regardless of what your source systems are, we map those source systems to that predefined data model. Now, the beauty of the data model, though, is that even though it's pre-built and predefined, it's not predetermined. So what that means is, let's say, for instance, you have a bariatric center of excellence, and you want to capture additional attributes that aren't in the pre-built or predefined data model. It's very easy to add additional tables or fields to the existing data model. And so what we do is we partner with you to understand what attributes you have available, what attributes you'd like to add to the data model to enhance it further, and really then once the data model and the dashboards are implemented in a very short period of time, you can take it in any direction you want from that point forward. So if you decide I want to add Press Ganey patient satisfaction data to my data model and build dashboards around that, you can add that content. If there are certain fields that you want to add to the encounter level data fact table, you can add that as well. So you're not limited in terms of how we initially define that predetermined data model, which allows you to go in any direction you need to go as an organization. So healthcare is changing rapidly and evolving quickly, and the questions and metrics that you're focused on today really may change very quickly over the course of time. So that's another great feature of the predefined and pre-built data model and those dashboards as well, is that you can take it in any direction you want from that point forward. So as this particular slide shows, even though your data may exist in disparate systems, we have the ability to map them to a single data table under the hood in the data model. So let's say, for instance, you get demographic information from your billing system, you get financial costing information from your cost accounting system, etc. We have the ability to pull the data from the right source using the right cadence, whether it be hourly for some data, whether it be monthly for other data, etc. So it really simplifies the whole process. Healthcare organizations are very complicated, and the IT systems that go into those to support those systems are even more complicated. In order to do reporting effectively and efficiently, we really need to simplify that reporting layer, the business intelligence layer, and that's what Catalyst represents, is a predetermined set of fields where we can take data from any of your data sources and map that, and that be the sole source of truth for your users. So let's talk about the content itself exactly. So here on the screen you see a balanced scorecard approach. We have financial, operational, quality, and staffing metrics. We also recently added a subject area around emergency department. And so what I'd like to do now is jump into that dashboard directly and just show you the tool itself. The first thing you'll notice that we built our dashboards in Oracle Business Intelligence, Oracle BIEE. We've also developed these dashboards in Tableau software as well. So even though there's a predefined data model, the layers in which the data can be accessed by your users very flexible in terms of the tool sets that you can use to access that. Now my browsers fell asleep a bit, so let's give it a second to wake up. But what I'll show you is just, for instance, under financial, we have some content around profitability, payer mix, case mix, lags and posting charges, etc. So the first thing I'll focus on is profitability by product line. So obviously an important aspect of running a hospital is understanding which particular cases are profitable, which ones weren't, because most hospitals have a very thin margin. So in our predefined data model, we have the ability to capture from your cost accounting systems the total charges, the total payments, the direct costs, etc. And so what we have is pre-built dashboards focused around profitability in terms of from the patient perspective as well as the physician perspective. So for instance, which particular physicians are driving profitability, which physicians are bringing volume in the door, and we even allow you to cohort those physicians into physician groups so you can see how physician group A compares to physician group B, etc. So let's just talk about one of our particular dashboards here and speak to functionality for a second. So at the top of every dashboard, you see a lot of parameterization. Your users have the ability to go in and specify date ranges. If you have multiple hospitals in your healthcare system, they can specify individual hospitals or more than one hospital. When we look at inpatient activity, we have that broken out into product lines. So for instance, here I'm looking at orthopedic surgical patients. But further, I can add additional filters for my users. For instance, this one focuses on specific physicians. I can look at activity for a certain set of physicians if I wanted to. So what we try to do with this particular tool when we build it is make it as flexible as possible for your end users. That means that the chief of surgery of cardiac services can come in and evaluate their slice of the pie. Someone who runs hospital A can come in and evaluate their activity, etc. So we want to make it a one destination for profitability information across your organization, regardless of who the user is and what their role is in the organization. So parameterization like this allows us to do that. Now you also have the ability, once we deploy this in your environment, to add or remove any of this totally in terms of customization. You can remove the prompts for physician and add one by nursing unit, whatever the case may be. So let's start taking a look at the content itself in the context of this particular dashboard. So we're looking at profitability by patient here. And I'm not necessarily concerned about all of the individual patients in the middle here, this cluster. What I really am concerned about are the outliers. You know, why do I have a highly profitable patient over here, and why do I have patients with a high amount of charges over on this axis who I've lost money on? So the margin here is on my x-axis, and the total charges is on my y-axis here, for instance. So I have the ability to interact with this information and drill down and see who these patients are, who the physicians are that service them, and so it makes it a very interactive process where I can interact right with this information. Let's say I click one of my dots and I can see that individual patient now, who the physician was, what the DRG was, what the length of stay was, etc. So our intent here is to, from a 50,000-foot perspective, to look at whatever the metric is we're looking at, in this case profitability, but be able to interact with that data on the fly and answer additional questions. So even though I'm showing a scatter plot with the individual patients by default when the users land on the page, I also have the ability to show alternate views of the data right behind that scatter plot. So behind that scatter plot, I have a table that shows me for orthopedic surgical, because that's what I picked up here, all of the individual DRGs that comprise that product line, and the number of cases and profitability broken out by hospital. So it's a very interactive approach where your users can land on a particular dashboard page and answer their questions. What we've intended to do is to remove any delay in someone accessing and trying to answer specific questions. So what used to happen in my old world, before we get a little more sophisticated, was we'd publish information and someone would inevitably say, this is great, can I see it this way? This is great, can I get it for this date range, etc. So we've pushed all of that onto the end user so they can answer exactly what they need in the immediate sense in terms of time, instead of having to go to your BI team and ask for a different dashboard to be produced, etc. So continuing with this data, looking at additional functionality, we have what we call field selectors built in here. So even though I'm looking at this information in terms of aggregate profitability broken out by hospital by month, I can also let my users see that information by week, by pay period, etc. And then the same is true for the patient volume. So the number of cases broken out by hospital trended over time, and now I'm looking at that by week. And further in the lower left-hand corner here, I have the 10 least profitable patients always on this page when I land on this page. So for my orthopedic surgical product line, I could see the 10 patients where I lost the most money. But all of this information, is, again, is interactive. So if I just click this column header, I can easily sort this from highest to lowest, and now I'm looking at my 10 most profitable patients instead of my least profitable patients. Again, a lot of functionality to allow you users to answer their specific questions in terms of the parameters at the top of the screen and in terms of the ability to interact with the charts directly and look at data in a different way. So continuing on that theme, we won't go through all the dashboards, I'll just do a few, but this is profitability, but instead of at the individual patient level, I'm looking at it by a specific individual physician. So each bubble here represents a different physician, and if I scroll down a bit, now I have physician groups, right? So I can answer a lot of questions in terms of understanding profitability from a physician perspective, from a patient perspective, but also recognize that the data model underneath this is very robust. And that means that I can easily create these same charts and dashboards on profitability by DRG, by zip code, by financial class and payer, because we're capturing a whole host of demographic and financial and clinical information on every single encounter in our data model. So questions that I may never even have thought about can be answered because we have so many possible permutations to look at this information. So it's a very robust and deep data model that allows you to answer questions in various ways. And the way this particular BI tool works is it's just drag and drop. So I have a business background. Everyone I have hired has a business background because we understand how a hospital operates and functions and makes money, etc. And so the tool sets themselves are GUI. They're just drag and drop, and SQL is created on the fly as you move the data. All you need to do is say, I want these fields, I want to sort them in this manner, and I want to build a chart that looks like this, and then you're done. So I mentioned before it's a balanced scorecard approach, lots of 20+ dashboards on this page. I'll just jump to one in each area just sort of to give you an idea as to content and functionality. And our intent today is to see if you further want to have a more deeper dive discussion on dashboards and specifically what in your organization is important. We can certainly do that in a separate one-on-one WebEx, but I'll just give you a bit of a taste of what we've got. So a lot of profitability in terms of a hospital system is driven by your inpatients, and a large part of your inpatients are driven by the emergency department. So we decided to look at throughput and volume that's flowing through the ED and understand that better. So here we have a volume heat map of when patients are arriving by day of week, by hour of day. And the redder it is, the more patients I have showing up at my door. So if you've ever done this analysis, you'll probably find that between 10 and 11 a.m. on a Monday is your busiest time in your respective emergency departments as well. And so we're looking at the ability to see when patients are arriving for whatever specified date range we specify in our parameters at the top. Here I have the busiest days for this date range, so I can see that all but one were a Monday, for instance, in terms of the busiest days in total. And then I can see my volume, how that fluctuates over time, whether it be daily or monthly, etc. So we also focus a lot on understanding where our patients are coming from, where are they originating, and why are they presenting to the emergency department, what is their chief complaint, what are the top diagnoses for folks who are showing up in our emergency departments. Of those patients, how many do we admit as inpatients through our ED, and how does that rate change over time, and how does that rate vary from physician to physician in the ED? and then understanding, again, here's an example of using a field selector where I can see the composition of my volume by various different ways. And again, anytime you see a blue sort of hyperlink here, that means that that information is drillable. I can drill down and see who those patients were just by clicking on that hyperlink. So it's not just a pretty 50,000-foot view, but it's the ability to interact with the information further and understand what's driving the results. And then we look at things like throughput. So from time of arrival to triage, from triage start to triage complete, to when they get assigned an ED bed, to when the RN sees them, to when the physician sees them, to when we make a decision to send them home or admit them. So all of those handoffs in the process, we want to understand those better and see where we have bottlenecks and what's affecting the effectiveness and efficiency of our emergency departments. And then finally, we focus on quality within the emergency department. So this is like a mini balanced scorecard approach focused on the ED, for instance, where we look at patients who have expired and what the leading causes of expiration were, and patients who leave without care being fully provided, frequent flyers, etc. So a lot of good, solid information related to the emergency department is presented on this particular dashboard. My browser is acting funny on me, but what I'll try to do is get back to my home page here. And let's just talk a little bit about, for instance, quality. Okay, so a big focus now. Historically, readmissions used to be a quality metric, and finance never really cared about it. Now readmissions have financial implications, and so everybody cares about readmissions. So we have a very useful dashboard focused on readmits, where we look at the 30-day readmissions relative to the total discharges, broken out by hospital, and again, the ability to drill down and see who those patients who were readmitted were. So I had 114 patients who were readmitted in whatever the time frame I ran this for was, and I can see those patients and see who they are, who the physicians were, and more importantly, you know, why they were here originally and why they came back in terms of their DRG, who their original physician was, who their second on their second admission, who their respective doctor was, etc. And then in the middle here, the ability to understand my readmits in terms of the days since the first discharge. So I can see that of these 380 readmitted patients, the majority of those, about 54 of them, came back within 24 hours or less than 1 day from their original discharge. So that's important. I need to understand who those and the circumstances around that, which will be different than those that come back 20 days later, for instance. And then finally, when we think in terms of readmissions, you have an initial discharge and a second discharge. And so what we do is we put that in sort of a matrix to try to filter out false positives, right? So if someone was initially discharged for an ear, nose, throat issue and they came back for a vascular issue, they're probably a false positive, whereas I may really want to focus and hone in on patients who were initially discharged for a vascular surgery DRG and then came back for a vascular surgery DRG. Those are patients that I really want to understand and take a look at the circumstances around those particular patients. What nursing unit discharged them? Where were they admitted from? Where were they discharged to? The physicians on both halves of the encounter, etc. That's an example of one of our quality dashboards. We also have dashboards around mortality rate, complications, resource utilization, where we take a look at expensive blood product being used or stent utilization, and seeing how there's variation in practice amongst your physicians. So for instance, I can see for a particular physician the types of stent products they use and how that varies and how they compare to their peer physicians in certain product lines, etc. And then again, as I mentioned, lots of content. We're just sort of doing a flyby here. But we have dashboards focused on operations of the hospital. So the discharges, length of stay, when am I discharging my patients, for instance? So what's the hour of day? So I can see the majority of my patients are discharged in the 2 p.m. hour. And that obviously is a concern for me, because if someone's being discharged, I want to discharge them as soon in the day as possible, because I have my ED patients showing up at 10 a.m. and I have my scheduled operations and surgeries happening early in the morning. I need to free up my bed capacity and have somewhere to be able to place those patients. So being able to manage and monitor by nursing unit, by physician, et cetera, when your patients are being discharged is obviously an important metric to monitor. And then finally, we have reports that focus on the biggest component of your expense profile, which is your labor expense. And so we take a look at payroll activity in terms of looking all your pay code transactions broken out by shift pay, regular pay, sick pay, all of the categorizations that you have in terms of your labor costs. And then we focus specifically on metrics such as overtime, for instance, to understand that better. And so I can look at a specific nursing unit and see how that varies over time. And then I can further break that out into type of position and understand the percent of overtime relative to total hours for my RNs versus my surge techs, for instance. So a lot of good information, but I can get very granular very quickly. So the intent of this balanced scorecard is really from the C-level down to department heads, down to back office staff and accounting and your billing department, et cetera, the ability to see all of this critical information, first from a sort of a 50,000-foot view, and then drill down further and look at visually and analytically what is driving the desired or undesired results, and then further taking action from there. So I'll turn it back over to you, Melissa, and I guess we can open up for questions.
Actually, I was going to ask if you wanted to talk a little bit about the work that we're doing together at Hackensack.
Sure,
I know
absolutely.
they've implemented some of these dashboards.
Yep, absolutely. So at Hackensack, which obviously is in New Jersey, we've already implemented the Catalyst product, and they selected Informatica as their tool set to move their data from their various disparate sources to our predefined data model. So I believe they have Epic as their clinical system, et cetera. And so they've been able to implement this in a 120-day period, and they have all of this up and running now. And in large part, as I mentioned when we started, the heavy lifting really is the migration of the data, because everything you're seeing on the screen here is pre-built and predefined. It's all out-of-the-box functionality. And so using Informatica, they were able to map all of their sources to our data model and to automate that whole process and to ensure that the data that actually flows into the data model is clean and crisp and accurate. And so it's been a great partnership, and using them as an example.
Excellent. And actually, one of the questions that we received during the conference is, when you mentioned data model, I know a lot of people are familiar with the Oracle data model or the IBM data model. Maybe spend a minute talking about how this data model is differentiated and the advantages of the FTI data model.
Sure, no problem. So our data model is really focused on, I really set out to, when we built this at FTI, to say, okay, what are the essential metrics you need to monitor in order to run a hospital effectively and efficiently and profitably? And so that's why you see this balanced scorecard approach of focusing on profitability and payer mix and everything that drives the top and bottom line to understand what role case mix plays and product utilization and resource utilization, et cetera. And so it really represents, if I was the president of a hospital, what are the metrics that I need to be on top of? It's really the balanced scorecard approach, whereas those data models are more so focused on the clinical aspects. So they're more useful if you're, for instance, focused heavily on research or clinical aspects, and not so much on the basic blocking and tackling of running a hospital from a financial perspective and focusing on length of stay and understanding your readmissions and understanding the labor component and understanding the emergency department and the role that plays in bringing volume in the door. that sort of thing. So great question, but ours is really focused on the basic fundamentals that you have to have a grasp on before you start to focus on more sophisticated clinical types of information. And so most organizations, in my experience, they have all the data that we're using to pump into our data model. They're not leveraging it effectively. They're not using a single tool set. They're not having all of their users consume the same information from that single tool set and having a single source of truth. And so that's really where you want to focus your efforts on, is really understanding and being able to turn around and tell your board why your quality metrics are what they are, and why your length of stay is what it is, and why your finances are what they are.
Great, thanks, Dan. And then, are there other questions that came in?
Yeah, I got a good one here. Dan, could you talk a little bit more about implementation and sort of what the resources and time frame are that makes that a challenge? Thanks.
Sure. Okay. So I'll use Hackensack as an example. So we recently implemented at Hackensack University Medical Center, and if you recall this particular slide, I'll jump back to, and I'll make it a little bigger. But okay. So this particular slide, everything you see in purple is built already, right? So what we do is we sit down and say, okay, here are all of the attributes that exist in our data model. Where does it live in terms of your source systems, and what do you consider the single source of truth for this particular field? So, for instance, where should we capture admit and discharge date and time? Does that come from your clinical system? Does that come from your EMR? Does that come from your revenue and billing system? Those types of questions. So we sit down with the appropriate people who understand the respective source systems. And so at Hackensack, we sat down with two different individuals, one on the clinical side, one on the financial side. And we went through and said, okay, where is this housed? And what's the cadence of it? Does this update throughout the day? Do you want to grab it nightly? For instance, for their cost accounting, they don't do daily cost accounting. They do that on a monthly basis. So we capture direct costs and indirect costs on a monthly basis, but we capture demographic information and discharge information on a daily basis. So that process is really the heavy lifting involved, and when I say heavy lifting, it's really not that complicated, especially if you have an ETL tool set like Informatica. When I was at Kaleida for 13 years, we didn't have a formal ETL tool set, so we had to hand script all of the data migration, and that is a bear to manage over time as you do that. So we're able to implement in less than 120 days at Hackensack, and that's because all you're really doing is sitting down and saying, okay, where do I grab this piece of information? And then you build the ETL. So from a support perspective, the answer in terms of how many people does it take for the healthcare organization, it all depends on what resources you have available to provide us. So let's say you have an ETL developer on site who can do the development, then we'll work with them. If you don't, we can supplement that and fill that role in, because we have not only healthcare expertise but technical expertise. So we can support everything from user training and education to building the dashboards to moving the data and all aspects in between. So we're able to do it at Hackensack with a core group of about probably 4 or so participating on the Hackensack side. And that includes analysts who understood where the data was, folks who validated the data, that sort of thing, and we did it all in 120 days. So they had these 20-plus dashboards up and running in less than 120 days. Any other questions for me?
I didn't see any in the chat, Dan. Maybe just open it up to any of the viewers if they have anything they want to know.
Sure.
doesn't sound like we have any more questions today.
I'll tell you what, I got one last one, Dan. If you could maybe just show us how interested parties can learn more about Catalyst. I'm going to go ahead and email everyone a copy of this video to share, and we'll be following up with people, but we'll just give them the information that they would need to know to get a more personal and comprehensive demo of Catalyst.
So our CEO is Asha Saxena, and she can be reached at the numbers you see on the screen or via her email at ftiweb.com. And I know Ben will follow up and provide you with that information. But effectively, any questions you have in terms of implementing the predefined dashboard, and we've even supported hospitals in terms of new content that they wanted to build and incorporate into their environment. You know, I and my team have a wealth of healthcare experience and expertise, and we have a wealth of technical knowledge as well. So it's the best of both worlds, and we can support you in any of those avenues. So that's all I have today, folks.
Great. Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Ben. Thanks, everyone, for joining today.